The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular, Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother, Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre.
You are listening to TMBDOS. They must be destroyed on sight. The following podcast may contain adult language, conversations surrounding adult situations that may not be suitable for younger listeners, as well as spoilers for the films discussed on this podcast. You have been warned. Now, come on in.
They must be destroyed on sight.
It is They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, episode 105. And I'm your host, Lee. Got no pride in his home, Russell. And I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel. Just can't take no pleasure in killing Harper. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, and as you say, I take no pleasure in killing, but a man's got to eat, you know.
It's a necessity sometime, yeah. We're not doing like a whole sort of planned tribute episode so much, but Tobe Hooper recently died, so we figured, hey, why not take the opportunity to jump on the bandwagon that everyone else has and cover Texas Chain Saw Massacre from 1974. Why the fuck not? And I know it at least sparked some interest in Daniel to download a bunch of Tobe Hooper stuff to watch, so we might do some more Tobe Hooper in the coming month and a half or so.
Yeah, no, definitely. I have not, until today, actually, I had not seen the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, although I had seen Summer School with Mark Harmon quite a few times as a callow youth. So I feel like that's really the perspective I'm going to bring is, I'm not really going to talk about the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. I'm going to talk about Mark Harmon today.
Mark Harmon.
So, yeah. I feel like that's what people really come to this podcast for is, discussion of mid-'80s tributes to classic horror films rather than actual discussion of classic horror films.
Yeah, and Mark Harmon conceals his own horrors as well. So
he does.
Yeah. So we figured we'd do Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but before then, we'll move on to our comments. We do have a few comments to go through here, so I'll just quickly get into them. We have 2 comments on our YouTube side of things from a YouTube user named Painted Pony Films. And on our Zodiac episode, he says, I saw this film, one of the only ones on the subject, I think. I don't think they showed enough. I remember they showed the murder scenes at the Lookout parking place, but didn't show enough of the murders. I wish a better Zodiac movie would come out, but nonetheless still worth watching. I think also American Graffiti is a San Fran-based movie and shows a murder scene at a popular parking spot for young adults. They must have been referring to the Zodiac. Okay, so when's the last time you saw American Graffiti, Daniel?
20 years ago?
Okay, so this is probably not going to help things. I don't remember a murder scene ever being shown in American Graffiti. I don't know I think he must be thinking of a different movie.
It's possible. No, yeah. I don't remember. I don't remember a murder scene, but I could be mistaken. But yes, it's been decades literally since I've seen American Graffiti.
I mean, I know George Lucas ended American Graffiti on a downer with like the what happened to the characters after the movie ended title cards. Like this guy died in Vietnam. This guy got ran off the road and killed. These people became boring upper class yuppie motherfuckers, But before then, the entire movie is like this casual series of vignettes with different characters having their last night of summertime driving around the city. Actually, it's it's pretty much Van Nuys Boulevard, but with higher production values, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I don't remember a murder scene, but I maybe it's time to revisit American Graffiti to get the connection to the Zodiac Killer. That's probably that's really the message of George Lucas's career, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as far as not showing all the murders and stuff, I think we went over it in the episode. Basically, David Fincher only wanted to show what was documented. Like the murders that they didn't really know anything about. They didn't have living witnesses to talk about or whatever. They skipped those over. So they wanted to keep it more on point and focused on what there still was out there, what information there was. So,
well, the film is less about the murders themselves. I mean, it's not a slasher film. It's a film about a slasher, and it's about the sort of like the social context of it and the sort of the obsession of the people kind of hunting for the killer more so. It's really, I mean, the killings are really just the setup for the story. It's not really about the killings at all. So I think that's, I mean, I understand that. I mean, I don't know. I feel like the Zodiac has been so done in culture, and we have decades worth of films that are aping the Zodiac. I don't know that we need a serial killer film that's just let's follow the Zodiac around, especially since we don't really know what the real story is because he was never found. And we don't, even if we discovered who it was today, we'll probably never really get a clearer idea of what actually went on at these scenes than we have right now. So I don't know if the idea of like let's try to do a photorealistic recreation of the Zodiac killings is a reasonable thing.
I still think they're interpretations of what the killings they have enough information about in the first place going down in the movie that we see.
Yeah,
I think they're pretty brutal enough. Like they're pretty cold and clinical and just right.
I mean, is he asking for just more blood? I mean, it seems like he's. I mean, I don't really get that comment unless he's just like, I'd like to see a serial killer movie that's just about like a realistic depiction of the Zodiac Killer. But I mean, okay, sure. I mean, if somebody wants to make it, I mean, I'll watch it. It's probably interesting, but it's not. I don't know why at this point.
And
just watch the Town That Dreaded Sundown, like
Town That Dreaded Sundown would also kind of fit into that. But and I mean. We have open invites eventually. Daniel and I are going to be on Badasses, Boobs, and Body Counts whenever they do that Zodiac movie that just goes into wild speculation and and bizarreness. So wait for that. And he also left a comment on our Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia review. He said, love this movie. Have it on Blu-ray, limited to 3,000 copies. Had to do it. It's Sam Peckinpah's masterpiece because it didn't have any studio influence. The Wild Bunch, now on director's cut, is also amazing, but this was done on a lower budget. Yeah, I mean, this was the tail end of Peckinpah's career, really, but it was the movie he wanted to make, for better or for worse. And I actually do agree that it's his masterpiece, honestly, but I know we had some differing opinions on it when we actually reviewed it. But yeah, it's a great movie as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like kind of coming back to that, I feel like I maybe came across as slightly negative on the film in the review because I really do love the film, but I think maybe like it hit me on the wrong day that week, where I rewatched it and just it wasn't feeling it. So I don't know. That's one I'm definitely going to have to revisit sooner or later. But certainly on that when I saw it the first time, many years ago, I mean, I definitely recognized it as a masterpiece. So maybe just the rewatch didn't hit me the way I wanted it to, but it's a great film, and particularly it's a great performance. Warren Oates.
Yeah, Warren Oates is the man. He really is. But yeah, we're going to do more Peckinpah too at some point. I mean, we have to do Straw Dogs at some point with Stray Dog.
That's the way I've always wanted to do it. I think that's going to be a fascinating pairing.
That's probably the most
Kurosawa and Peckinpah together.
Yeah, but also, I mean. Eventually, when we get back to Westerns, we need to do like the Wild Bunch and Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, and might even just do like a triple bill Peckinpah, do Ride the High Country as well, because that's one of the sort of transitional Westerns from the classic era to the modern era. So
sure,
it'd be something to do.
I'm always down for more Westerns.
Oh yeah, and we have some comments from CB Fall now. He's left several comments over the last couple of weeks. We've been between weeks, not having an episode here or there. So I just collected them. You get to pick and choose which episode they were left on,
Okay.
because they're all pretty much the same thing, and I'm not trying to make fun of CB Fall. I appreciate his enthusiastic support of basically everything I do now.
Nice.
He leaves comments on. So first comment, fantastic podcast, Lee and crew. Smiley face. Next comment, really excellent podcast. And finally, very excellent podcast. So, I mean,
Nice.
top marks across the board for us.
I love Lee and crew. That must have been an episode I wasn't on, because you
Actually, that was an episode you and I were on, and Paul wasn't on.
Oh well, so
apparently you are an entire crew.
yeah. No, well, he didn't know my name, but he knew. I mean, he knew yours, so that was enough.
You're the crew.
We do appreciate you listening and commenting. So
yeah. And finally, and this is the question that I wish Paul was here to answer. Paul is supposed to be here. He has to join link yet again. I don't know what happened to him. Either he got drunk or he had to work or something. But we'll see. I mean, at the very worst, we'll have to come back with a bonus episode for October and have him talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But Darren Wilson, who is the host of the Psychosemantic podcast, a podcast our friend Kit Power has been on, which is actually a really excellent podcast that is far more political than we are. Goes into movies and then goes into the social and political commentary of those movies, and at the same time has a lot of fun and doesn't come off as dry or stodgy or just overly intellectual or bullshitty. It's a really, really good fucking podcast, and if you haven't listened to it, you should listen to it. We have played the promos for them a couple times here on the show. So he says, what's your third favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie? So
I've only seen one. I've only seen one at this point, so there's not much I can say to this. But
yeah. So I think Darren.
How many are there? There are four, right?
There is like 7 if you compare.
Okay.
If you take into account the remakes. So you have Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You have Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. You have 3. You have Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. You have the remake. You have the prequel to the remake, and then you have the recent Texas Chainsaw 3D, which is supposed to be in the continuity a sequel to the original film that ignores all the other films. And yeah, most of those are garbage. Most of them are hot garbage, by the way. And his question is slyly designed because I think he's going on the premise that I would say my first 2 favorite are Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. But honestly, I don't know if I'd say that. I really like the fucking remake from the 2000s. I think it's actually really goddamn well done. I think it's not given its fair look at. It basically just goes the opposite of what the Texas Chainsaw Massacre actually did, where everyone accused that movie of being the most brutal, horrific, torture porn, sadistic movie ever, when really it wasn't. The remake actually goes more in that direction, and yet still pulls off a really decent sort of homage and remake of the first film. So yeah, it's hard because I really like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 as well. So, I mean, just initially thinking about it, that would probably be, that would be my third favorite, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, I think, because that's a really underrated, interesting movie as well. It takes the subtle humor in the original film and just amps it up into a just all-out black comedy kind of thing.
Right.
And just goes balls to the wall. I mean, this is Tobe Hooper.
That was a canon film, right?
Yeah, it was a canon film. It was.
I saw it. I saw a commentary on it in the canon film documentary that was playing on Netflix for a while. Yeah,
that's one we need to cover at some point. That's a fun film. It's one where lots of money was thrown at them at certain points and then taken away because canon kind of did that shit because they were shady as fuck.
Because they're canon, yeah.
Yeah, but that was also sort of the height of Tobe Hooper just snuffing down mountains of cocaine as well. So,
and what else can you say?
Yeah, but yeah, honestly, probably Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 is my third favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. So there you go, Darren. And if Paul does show up, I'll get him to answer too, because I'm sure he'll Actually, he'll probably say it's part 3 because I don't think he's seen any of the remakes or anything like that because his sort of cutoff point is like 1999 for all horror movies for the most part. So,
is it that late? Really? I was kind of thinking 1981 might be like the furthest he's willing to go into the present with watching. I guess for horror films, so he'll let it slide. But
yeah, I'll make a brief mention. I just recently recorded the latest episode of City of the Dead with our mutual friend James Murphy over at the Pex Lives podcast. I'm the co-host of that. I'm lucky enough to have been invited and installed as the permanent co-host for that podcast. And we're doing the Amicus films. And once we get through the Amicus films, we're going to start doing related films. You know, like we actually, on the latest episode after we finished it, we talked about what we were going to do. And basically, we have a cutoff point, 1979. Nothing past 1979. So we're just going to start looking at older horror films that are somewhat related to Hammer and Amicus and that sort of oeuvre, I guess, is the word to say. And we're having a lot of fun. We just did Tales from the Crypt, the original Tales from the Crypt.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun talking about that. And I assume that's going to come up fairly soon because we're getting to the end of September. So James tries to have an episode out every month. I'm expecting that's probably going to be up right next week. I will link to that. So look for that, at the very least, linked on the Facebook page. So there you go.
Is that the best way to get a hold of us?
It is the single best way to get a hold of us and see what's going on with the podcast. And, let us know what you think about it. So there you go.
Broadcasting from the cursed earth, the Psychosemanticast.
Let us face, without panic, the reality of our time. The fact that atom bombs may someday be dropped on our cities. And let us prepare for survival by understanding the weapon that threatens us.
To have an ignorant, thin-skinned megalomaniac who sends off Twitters at 3 a.m. if somebody angered him.
Neo-Nazis turning up in Washington, D.C. to have a rally saying Heil Trump.
We talk about politics.
I knew I couldn't trust you corporate greaseballs.
We talk about movies.
You can't come down here and arrest people just because of what they look like. Are you crazy? But that's police harassment.
We talk about political movies.
We're in trouble. The whole world's in trouble. They're all around us and we never knew it. You can only see them with these special glasses.
The Psychosemanticast.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of it.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was.
How
did
you watch this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Sitting here with nothing
All right, we're going to be looking at the Texas Chain Saw Massacre from 1974.
What happened was true. The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America.
Sally, I hear something. Stop! Stop!
This is the movie that is just as real, just as close, just as terrifying as being there. Even if one of them survives, what will be left? The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
Directed by Tobe Hooper. Written by Kim Hinkle and Tobe Hooper. It is starring Marilyn Burns as Sally, Alan Danziger as Jerry, Paul A. Partain as Franklin, William Vale as Kirk, Terry McMinn as Pam, Edwin Neal as the hitchhiker, Jim Sidow as Old Man, also known as the cook, and Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface, and John Dugan as grandfather. And the first synopsis we're going with from IMDB, and it is from Michael Brook. So let's see what you have to say. It says, en route to visit their grandfather's grave, which has apparently been ritualistically desecrated, 5 teenagers drive past the slaughterhouse, pick up, and quickly drop a sinister hitchhiker, eat some delicious home-cured meat at a roadside gas station before ending up at the old family home, where they're plunged into a never-ending nightmare as they meet a family of cannibals who more than make up what they lack in social skills. I guess that fits.
I don't know if it's
somewhat.
never ending. I think that might be the wrong adjective to use there. Because
well, I mean, if
for
you
a lot
take
of it ends pretty quickly. I mean, it's not an extended a thing.
Yeah, it might be never ending for our main lead, but other than that, yeah.
For Sally there, yeah.
Yeah.
She's got emotional scarring for decades, surely.
Yeah. But of course, this is Tobe Hooper's first big film, really, his kind of big break that put him on the map. He was making films before this. He is sort of a hippie Texas director. He was a sort of, he's kind of this counterculture kind of hippie director who always wanted to make it big, always wanted to be in big movies. And he was apparently picking up cameras at the age of 3 or 4. Oh, shit. And Paul just joined in.
Yeah, I passed out again.
All right.
Damn kids.
Damn kids. All right. Well, before we get right into the fucking review of the movie, Paul, I'll just go back to this. I'll go right back to this question that was asked of us, so we can get your opinion as well before we jump into this. By the way, we have Paul. His family's always been in Meat Ramalli.
Yep.
So welcome, Paul. Glad you could join us.
Glad to be here.
And Darren Wilson from the Psychosomatic podcast asked a question. I already gave an answer. He says, what is your third favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre film?
Third favorite? My third favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre film was probably Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, because I kind of like Leatherface a bit more.
Oh, really? Okay.
The first, yeah. So it's the 1, 3, 2. It's pretty much my...
We had the same answer.
There you go.
Although my second favorite is actually the modern remake.
There you go. Yeah, not me.
Well, yeah, I don't think you've ever seen it, have you?
Yes, yeah. Actually,
did you?
I got a chance to see it, and I actually got a chance to talk to Gunnar Henson about it. And basically, he spent 45 minutes crapping on it, which was fantastic.
All right, cool. So we'll get back to the review then. So I'm going to ask Daniel first. What are your sort of since this is your first time watching this film?
Sure.
What's your sort of initial thoughts on this?
I really enjoyed it. I think it's not nearly as sort of bloody and violent as is sort of the reputation. I really love the sort of oppressive atmosphere. I really love the sort of it's an isolated kind of area, so you get this sort of sense of being all alone. I love how real everything looks. I mean, the kind of low budget and the kind of high contrast photography. There's a lot of grain. I mean, it really kind of gives you this kind of you are there kind of element. I love the effects. I mean, that's really the thing for me that I keep coming back to is just how good some of the models are, some of the blood work and everything is. I love the kind of slow moments in the middle. I love how much time we spend just kind of hanging out with these Central Texas losers, we're just kind of hanging out with them. You really get a sense of kind of who these people are, at least to some degree. I know there's a kind of a political reading we can get into maybe a little bit later, which is much less overt than I think someone like Romero would make. It's much more kind of the moment sort of thing. You kind of have to be there in '74. You kind of have to know what he's going for, but. Overall, I really enjoyed the film. I think it's a classic, obviously, and an hour and 28 minutes. I mean, it flies by. It does not wear out its welcome at all. So yeah, really nice.
Cool. Paul, when's the first time you saw it, and what's your sort of initial thoughts on it?
Probably when I was about 10. Rented it from West Coast Video. It was West Coast Video or Powerhouse Video back then, and it was. When we first watched, because we watched Night of the Living Dead, not Living Dead, but we watched because I watched that before. But it was like Evil Dead and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, things like that. Just to give you an example of what we were trying to watch back when we were like 9. The first watches were always kind of like, okay, what's going on? We were never scared or anything like that for some reason, maybe because we were tortured children. But we were just watching it, and the first one, it's kind of like, okay, we're watching a film. All right. Okay, this is where's all the tits and blood and all the okay. And then I still remember as soon as he trips on the stairways, Leatherface comes out, smashes him with the hammer, and that door shutting. Ever since that moment, I was hooked on the film. I'm like, okay, now shit just got real. Okay, we're good. That was I remember that. That was the moment I got hooked on to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because the first 25 minutes I couldn't give a hell about the film. I was about to shut it off and put back Evil Dead back in.
Right.
Which I didn't give a shit about that film until the tree rape scene.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, now I'm stuck on this film. You know what I mean? So yeah. When you're 9, you don't give as many fucks. I guess. You know. Yeah. I can't. I'm dying now. I can't be wasted to watch a film with no death immediately. I don't know.
But yeah, you do make a good point there, because the film basically for the first half hour or so just kind of builds up to that moment where all of a sudden Leatherface shows up, hits the dude with the hammer, pulls him in, shuts the door. That's just a total changeover from what you'd seen for the first half hour. I mean, the first half hour had built up some menace and creepiness because, there's grave robbers out there. Texas is really hot and everybody is weird and just kind of crazy, stir crazy, whatever. But then the next 15 minutes, half your protagonists are killed just quickly, just knocked off. There's no... It's not like a slasher film where there's a stock scene or anything like that. It's just they all keep looking for their friends and they all keep getting killed and dispatched really goddamn quickly. And I think that's probably more the do of why people kind of initially walked out of this.
You have to understand, the bad guys keep getting killed quickly because they're the trespassers. You have to understand. They're the bad guys. They shouldn't be on the property. The good guys keep having to kill them. Another bitch.
Yeah, that's the mentality of Leatherface, because when you look at the performance of the character, and Gunnar Hansen has stated this, that he went into this performance with the idea that these are intruders on his property, and he can't understand why people keep showing up all of a sudden. Like it's just like his worst possible day. Where
obviously they're ruining his life. You know what I mean? Like, because obviously he's playing someone with a little bit of a handicap, that kind of idea. I like Gunnar Hansen's line. He says, Leatherface is the most violent, strongest, most powerful, and the most frightened character in the whole film.
Yeah, because after like, I think it's the initial, maybe it's the initial or it's the second time he kills, he runs into the living room and sits down on the chair and starts basically just freaking out. Why are these people showing up? What the hell is going on? You know?
Oh, yeah, because there's no... Unlike part 2, there's no "I killed in ecstasy."
Yeah, no using your chainsaw as a phallic symbol.
Yeah, Franco. I just used one of your lines, but I put "I" instead of "she." But it was one of those kind of deals. Like there was no what you see in other classic like slasher genre horror films. I mean, this is something that this is screwing him up as he's doing it. He's not having a good time doing this. He's just doing this because it's the only thing he knows what to do. You know what I mean? Like, what is going on? Oh, my God. And the guy tells him, you don't want to go mess around no old house. Those things are dangerous. It's like, I love just basically the warning is, don't trespass because people around here will kill you. And they're like, oh, look, an old house. Let's go check it out. Hello.
It kind of builds on like the worst possible stereotype East Coasters would have for Texas, basically. Yeah, everybody in Texas is like this, you know.
Well, the best part of the film so far, and I remember seeing this when I was a kid too for the first time, was when they were both getting a cola outside the gas station and the upshot at their butts. It was like, great shot. That's a good one.
Well, there's a couple of really nice butt shots in this.
There are quite a few. There's quite a bit of that. And
tongue in cheek.
Much appreciated.
Yes. Excellent.
I mean, if I was to sort of read into it as far as like political sort of subtext goes, it's kind of, and honestly, it's just where movies were going too. I mean, people sort of make a big deal now, and there's like a lot of hyperbole about how Texas Chainsaw Massacre was like a real changeover for what horror would be, and especially in the North American markets. And but it's true. I mean, this takes off from kind of what Night of the Living Dead gave us in '68, where it becomes much more visceral, much more real. But here it gets even more real because you don't have the supernatural at all. And that's what probably 99% of fucking horror movies up to this point were pretty much your standard either Hammer or just American International Pictures fucking supernatural horror movies. This is more about the current youth in the 1970s, post-Vietnam, running up against the really decayed, perverted, insular previous generation in America. And it's an interesting sort of cultural clash there. And I mean, I'm pretty sure Tobe Hooper, who was sort of a real dyed-in-the-wool counterculture kind of dude, hippie in the sense of like Dennis Hopper and people like that sort of hippie, was putting that into this. There's some political stuff in there, but I don't think that he was thinking too much about it because they were all basically sweltering in 100 degrees plus heat in Texas and smoking a lot of drugs and filming this fucking...
It's hard not to not like think of Vietnam, right? You know, with the heat and the sweat, you know, and then it's just kind of brutal violence. And
you just see a helicopter going over playing AC/DC or something like that.
Right.
Something crazy generic ass thing they do now on war movies.
You need Fortunate Son playing as like, you know, Grunt's Land and you know
CCR, that's what I mean.
Somebody's saying Gooks a lot. That's really the
boo. Charlie's up in the trees again.
But yeah, I mean, you know, in 74, I mean, I think people would have been, I mean, you know, it's interesting. This kind of comes at the kind of the tail end of Vietnam, whereas, you know, something like Night of the Living Dead is kind of more in the midst of it. It's kind of more, you know, kind of before things got really disgusting on television. Because at this point, I mean, today, you know, the war in Afghanistan has been going on for 16 years, and like we just kind of, it's just sort of something that we know is happening, but we don't like see it on our television screens every night. But Vietnam was definitely that. I mean, there was footage constantly. This definitely kind of has that same kind of look and feel of a lot of the Vietnam footage that you can imagine or that you can remember. So I think there's a real element of that of like, let's bring that violence home. Let's not subject Vietnamese people to this. Let's put white people here and then like see how people feel about it. You know, one of the things we talked about in the crime series was, you know, the kind of 70s malaise that was sort of just kind of happening around this kind of time period. And this is, you know, there's the gas crisis, which is obviously something that's kind of, you know, on people's minds. You know, the gas station is out of gas. And I mean, you know, it's this sort of like failed image of like, this is what America is now. We're just this disgusting, you know, lump of flesh that's, you know, just kind of perambulating wildly, but not really able to, you know, we've lost our way. And of course, this is just how people act now because this is just who we are. You know, I think that's kind of going on underneath. I mean, but it's really, I mean, it's not nearly as overt as I think, you know, I think it is fairly, you can look past all that watching the film if you're, especially today, it's, you kind of have to put yourself in that 74 mindset to really kind of like get in with that, you know?
Yeah. The movie does build up the suspense really well because you're just following these characters, and I think the performances in this are all pretty much across the board really good. Like, they're very naturalistic. You know, it's not necessarily professional actors. Again, there's sort of like that Romero thing where it's Hooper's using basically just like local actors and stuff who haven't done a lot of anything. But they give off these really naturalistic performances, and I'll get more into why that is as well, because when we talk about just sort of how grueling the shoot was and everything, it'll become more apparent. But everyone's kind of believable. You kind of understand who every character is. You kind of know who they are. And then they just start dropping like flies so quickly. That's what makes it the most shocking, I think, is that the violence is just really swift and realistic. It's not a drawn-out torture porn kind of thing. It's just really quick. It's 2 or 3 hammer shots to the head, sticking a girl on a meat hook, and a chainsaw on a disabled guy, and that's really it. There's hardly any build up to it as well, because like I said, within like 15 minutes you lose over half of your protagonists. Actually, just go down like that.
I mean, basically everybody's dead.
Like a girl.
Yeah, everybody's dead except for the girl. You know, the final girl, and then, you know, we spend 20 minutes kind of, you know, terrorizing her, and then the movie's over. You know, that's the structure. But I would like to highlight the hitchhiker, the scene with the hitchhiker in the van. It's a great sequence. It's so like kind of creepy because, you know, kind of coming at this not knowing the film at all, kind of like, what the fuck is this guy's problem? You know, kind of like referring, you know, kind of talking about the slaughterhouse and the sort of, you know, this guy's like lost his job. You know, it's like, you know. It's like, yeah, it was better the old way because back then, you know, I had a job. You know, it's like, my God, you know, what a
you used to hit him with the hammer right in the head.
The sleds was better. They died better.
Yeah.
There's a lot packed into that. I'll just leave it there. But I love that scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in the film.
Thing I love
like
about
I said, just like From Beyond, everything's better when it's awkward and creepy.
Yeah,
even love scenes.
Yeah, so it's not like the typical formula you would see in later, like slasher films and stuff, because this really isn't a slasher film in that sort of sense. Like, this is before that was kind of a genre, right? Yeah, like, this is more established. This is proto slasher, I guess you would say. But I love that. Like, these are all Texas people. These kids are Texas people, and so they know, you know, certain parts of Texas. Little bit more rural than where I'm from, you know. So, and I mean, Texas is an amazingly big place. So, I mean, not every goddamn place is the stereotypical Texas place, right? But
no, everybody in rural Texas is a serial killer with a leather face mask.
I'm moving.
But what I really like about that scene in the van is they're trying to be nice. They're trying to relate to this guy because there's like, okay, so yeah, he's a bit of a hillbilly, but whatever. What the fuck? He's a person. We'll give him a fucking ride. Oh, okay. He's got this really big birthmark on his face. And he seems to be fond of cutting himself. And, oh, now he's going to cut Franklin. He's going to take pictures and then burn them when we don't want to buy them. Okay, yeah, he's fucked up. Let's get him the fuck out of the van. But, I mean, they try hard to be nice to this motherfucker.
I think it was the cutting that really unsealed the deal. If you know what I mean.
That's a moment like you let somebody in your car and then they just cut their hand open on your knife. That's kind of a sign like, hey, maybe don't give this guy any more rides.
But I like how it subtly sets up stuff, because basically what he's doing is something he's done over and over again. He accosts travelers, talks to them. So there's a method to his madness. Like, he's insane, but there's a method to it. He cuts his hand, he gets kicked out of the vehicle, smears a symbol on the vehicle with blood, and signals that, hey, once they show up, because there's only one place they can show up, is the gas station down the road.
Right.
Once they show up there, they're marked, that they're the next ones. I really like that. I think we should just talk about some of the performances here. Just get into it. Like, I don't know about you guys, but my favorite performance out of this is Jim Sedow as the older brother / the cook. I mean, he was a professional actor, so he was saddled with all these sort of college kids who were, maybe just amateur actors or not even actors when they got into this. I just love his performance because it kind of rings true as a guy who has probably slowly gone crazy over the years, but at the same time, he tries to control himself every once in a while. Like, he snaps out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you see moments where he tries to instill order in the chaos, but as he watches, you see on his face, he just slowly, he starts laughing and smiling again. And he just starts getting into it. And goddamn, stop being crazy, fuck. And then he starts laughing. Yeah. And the best thing about him is his face. Like I mentioned, we just did Tales from the Crypt on the City of the Dead podcast. And those are based on comics that have a certain artistic style where you see a lot of details on the face of the characters. His face is right out of fucking Tales from the Crypt. He's got this very highly articulated face for expression, and it just looks like once he goes crazy, it just goes depraved. It's a total changeover from the sort of amicable, oh yeah, rural guy, owns a gas station, seems upright, forthright, whatever, normal guy. But then he starts fucking smiling, and it just goes all fucking sideways whenever he starts smiling.
My absolute favorite is, look what your brother did to the door. How doesn't he have no pride in his home? It's just like, oh, that is fantastic.
He tries to get outraged, and then slowly he just jumps right back into the insanity and gets into it.
Well, and then right after that, he's wondering about, he was yelling at Leatherface about which kids he got, who got away, and this and that. Okay, you and he didn't have anything to yell at him about. He went, you damn fool, you ruined the door.
You ruined the door, you damn fool.
Started beating him. It's like, then he started beating him. No, and it's great. I mean, like, especially in the famous dinner scene. And you can just randomly see him like going to like straight face to laughing to straight face to just randomly straight. It's great. I like the fact that half of his lines were not lines. When he's trying to talk to Sally, you just like I was like, oh, are you speaking? Because I'm pretty sure half of it was just like, now don't get excited now. And then he beats the crap out of her with that. I mean, literally. Beats the crap out of him with that broom.
We'll get into poor Sally's predicament.
It's so great. I mean, this is another film you will never be able to make again.
Yeah.
One of many that you can't do it. You can't make these films anymore. You use two words immediately that I use to describe this, which is visceral, real. That real, surreal, and raw.
Yeah, because it is kind of surreal as well, because it just goes nuts. Like it is psychedelic in a way, because, I mean, this is coming from a bunch of fucking hippie filmmakers who are fully invested in trying to do that sort of thing as well. Tobe Hooper's previous film was about, which I think starred his co-producer partner, Kim Hinkle, as this mostly naked hippie guy doing lots of drugs. Like, that was, I think that was one of his previous films. So
you were born for this role. I know.
So that's what they're going for. But I mean, Jim Sedow's performance is amazing, and I think it's one of sort of a trifecta of really great. Of 4 really great performances in this, because you've got Gunnar Hansen he actually spent time in a home for the mentally disabled to try to pick up some of their mannerisms. He was actually trying to be sensitive about it and, and trying to make a realistic portrayal of someone who is maybe mentally disabled and like lived in a abusive rural family that were never going to get this guy help at all, So I think his performance is really good. Like,
there is a reading. What this family really needed was like a robust social safety net.
They needed some health care. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they also hint that economically they were just kind of left behind. Basically, is kind of like the excuse for them becoming cannibals. Which, okay, so they became cannibals that quick. All right.
I mean, who knows how long Spence Slaughterhouse closed? Or
I've known some people who have been starving for a while, and none of them tried to eat me yet. But hey,
you don't live in Texas.
Well, I would
you have health care in Canada, Lee. Come on.
Yeah, I guess true.
So it's like, sure, lots of people wouldn't eat me, but I'm a dirty scumbag, so I understand that. They don't even that's an insult to you, Lee. I mean, I'd eat you a lot faster than other people would.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul.
I don't even need to be hungry, so.
I especially appreciate. I mean,
if you feel that's a compliment, I would totally chop off your leg and roast it. I'm okay with that.
It's nice to be valued. It is.
Yeah, I would make sure that you live so we can both enjoy it. Share and share alike.
All right. Yeah, we can still do beer reviews and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But
you don't eat a prize podcast host like that all at once, Paul.
No.
You have to savor.
You have to do a proper whiskey and beer pairing.
Other 2 really great performances in this. First off, I'll mention Franklin. I think it's a great performance because he's so goddamn annoying.
Yeah.
At the time, nobody quite knew that he was doing a method performance, so everyone was really literally irritated with him, and that comes out in their performances as well. How irritated they were with him. But Paul Partain was actually doing a method performance there. And so, goddamn, that's a great performance. Franklin is an annoying...
Yeah, Franklin's perfect.
Annoying outcast who has had his last straw, but at the same time, everyone who has sort of had to basically drive him around and carry him in their social group has also had their last straw. So, like it all comes to a head right at the start of this movie, basically.
Sally, get back and push down.
God, Sally!
Sally!
We should just take the van, Sally, and go.
Yeah.
We just go, Sally. Come on now.
Jerry has the keys.
Jerry has the keys. Oh.
Yeah. I like it because he did say in one interview, he's like, I was afraid I'd lose him if I ever took him off, so I had to keep him on. And they hated me for it, but that was good because I wouldn't want to be near me either because I was an asshole. And I was like, well, he knows.
It's just nice to know that they actually all made up afterwards.
Oh yeah,
because they're all amateur actors, so why would they understand that he's a method performer at that point, right? I mean, it makes sense. And years later, they all sort of made good. So that's nice to hear. But there's this realism to the performances here that kind of gets you into that docudrama sort of feel.
Yeah.
And
there's a naturalism to it, even the way he plays with the knife, Even the decision to have a character in a wheelchair. I mean, it's such an interesting decision, right? Especially since the actor is not someone who's in a wheelchair. So bringing that element into it, I'm kind of fascinated by that decision.
Well, it works for the narrative too, because it gives them an excuse to keep them there for a longer period of time. Like it hampers them, right?
Right.
Him in a wheelchair makes them slow down, makes them stay there for a longer time, makes it more believable that they would end up running afoul of the cannibal family and getting killed. I mean, when Sally is stuck with Franklin at the end there, that really hammers that shit home. That shit, she's stuck because she has to take care of Franklin. She can't, just leave him. So she's stranded there. And that just transitions to Marilyn Burns' performance, which I think is fucking stellar in this film, especially since the shit she went through. She literally got hurt in this film. A lot of the blood on her is actually real.
Yeah.
She was getting whipped and smacked by branches and stuff when she was running, where she jumps out of the window to escape the family. There's a stunt shot showing her going out of the window, but they did a pickup shot from behind showing her hit the ground, and she came from the stunt shot was just from the ground floor window. So the stunt woman just jumped out of a ground floor window through fucking sugar glass.
Mm-hmm.
But she jumped from a scaffolding to get that pickup shot and actually hurt herself. She sprained her ankle. So when you see her limping at the finale of the film, she's actually limping. Like, she's really limping. And she got like 2 black eyes in this film, just getting whipped by shit. And she actually had to get cut in the scene where they cut her to bleed her into the grandpa character's mouth. They couldn't get the tube to work for the cut effect behind the knife, so they actually had to cut her to get blood out of her.
Yeah.
So
they had this scene where it was there was 2 foot drop that you had to make through the window.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't very safe, so they let her drop from like 6 or 7 feet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that was safe. Oh, whatever.
What a weird decision, man. I mean, this whole production was it was set up to have some sort of fuckery going on, because you're shooting in Texas in the summer, in a heat wave in Texas at that, hotter than usual in Texas. They shot longer than they expected. For instance, Gunnar Hansen had to wear the same goddamn shirt for weeks on end, and they could not clean it because they were scared it was going to, like, the dye in it would run out. So they had to keep consistency for the shots for continuity's sake. So they're like, you can't wash the shirt. So he was wearing the same goddamn shirt for about a month in the Texas heat, and everybody stunk on this production. From what I've seen on the sort of the documentaries and shit with this, the smell was just so goddamn bad that they, eventually they got used to it. But Gunnar Hansen was saying, like, yeah, I was the stinkiest motherfucker there.
Well, there's a lot of people who did get violently ill on the set, especially because the cooking bones and the cooking raw, rotting flesh that's all over the place. I love the fact that they used all these animal bones and human parts and things with it, and then the fake skin, and they tried to make everything was just find it in your backyard and throw it in a trailer and nail it to this. And I mean, the name escapes me at the moment, but the fact that he went through and made all these different parts and all this stuff, and he came up with good ideas about not making the meat hook go all the way through, and set up all these set designs with all this live chickens and dead animals, and wrapped them around chairs and things like that, all the bones, and got that Ed Gein vibe to like the 10th level. And I think without that, I don't think the film would have been as incredibly shocking and surreal.
Well, yeah, let's get into that for the set design of this film, because that's another big piece of why this film's so effective. This is the big part where this draws from Ed Gein. You'll see a lot of people say, oh yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface, totally inspired by Ed Gein and shit. Like, yeah, in part, true. But the biggest parts you see are actually the set designs in the house. Because that was stuff Ed Gein actually did. He would make furniture out of bones. So that was very much present in the set design here, like lots of chicken bones, animal bones. They were getting dead dogs, dead pets, whatever, that were being like burnt down or boiled down or whatever to strip the flesh. They were getting the bones, putting them in the house. Again, the table scene, which apparently took an immense amount of time to fucking shoot, which is why it became
hours.
Yeah, which is why it became so hectic. That shit was just baking in the fucking heat. And they also had the entire room blacked out because they were shooting during the day. So they had to keep the light out. So they had those windows blacked out, and they had fucking, of course, the really hot fucking lights inside to actually get light while they're shooting, which just raised the temperature to way above 100 degrees. Gunnar Hansen said 120 was really soft estimate.
Yeah, a low estimate would be 120.
Yeah. So these guys
it was already 100 outside to begin with.
Marilyn Burns, the clothes she was wearing, she had worn those bloody soaked clothes for so long that when she finally took them off, they were just stiff.
Yeah.
And she had to put them back on because they didn't have a good shot of the final scene. She had to actually come back and put those on. But yeah, I mean, the set design in this is great. All those little bones and like feathers and shit in the bones, like how dirty does that fucking feel?
Yeah,
seeing that poor girl just fall into that room and like move around. Like, how many diseases are you picking up right there? Just coming in contact with that shit. And then you see live chickens in the fucking cage, which just adds a weird contrast to that whole thing.
Yep, it just reminded me of we had a band trailer just like that, basically, growing up. The band trailer that we had with all the shit set up had bones hanging from the ceiling everywhere, and it was great. That was good. It was definitely an impact on our psyches, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It follows us, even to this day. It has not stopped.
But yeah, you, Daniel, what think of the other performances on this one?
I really like the final girl. I'm sorry, I don't know her name.
Marilyn Burns.
Yeah, I think she's phenomenal. I think performance like that is so it's so central to the film because basically for the last 20 minutes we're really just kind of following her around, and it would be really easy to just be scared, and scream. She's not just a scream queen. I think there is an element of we empathize, with her, and I think that's there's a humanity there that doesn't get lost in the mayhem. I really love her. I actually really love the. I do love the cook. I do love that performance as well. But again, I really do want to call out the hitchhiker. I think he's really phenomenal.
He's good too. Yeah.
Again, in that particular scene, but then later on in the dinner scene, it's there's not a weak performance in the bunch, particularly in that sequence. These are four people who each kind of have their own personalities and motivations, and each kind of have their own thing they want in this moment. You really, again, it's a simple thing, when you watch the film, it's not such a, this isn't Merchant Ivory drama or anything, but you really get a sense of there are different personalities that are kind of pushing and pulling on events, even in a fairly straightforward kind of.
Don't they actually feel like a family too?
Yeah.
They do. And it feels like there are arguments that they've been having for 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And which one of them are they feeding off of this time to make the next decision?
You broke the door, that seems God damn it, you broke the door again. Just like when you were 12.
For Leatherface's character too, the interesting thing is there is just Leatherface, the person, there somewhere underneath the mask, but he generally takes on the personalities of the masks that he puts on. Mm-hmm. So there's almost ambiguous kind of thing there where he has the female mask, where he's almost the default female, the matriarch.
He's definitely the female role in the family. He plays that role. Yes.
Yeah. What I really like is, even though these guys are fighting, and these are all brothers, by the way. Sometimes you see Jim Cito incorrectly called the father of these characters. They're actually all brothers. He's just a much older brother, although he might be father and brother. You never know.
Ding.
Yeah, but
there's a real deliverance aspect. Although this is pre-deliverance, so
Yeah, when you see their interaction, though, it does feel like family fighting, and I love that even though they're all fighting each other, they have this reverence for their grandpa, who is 124 years old at this point in this film, and is barely alive. But they feed him the blood of their victims to keep him alive somehow, which kind of echoes back to Ravenous.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The cannibal Wendigo eat people to stay young kind of thing. Yeah. And of course that was Jim Dugan, who was 18, 19 years old at that time, under intensive makeup. Yep. And they only had him for a limited time. So in the shooting for him, they had him in the makeup for 30 hours or something like that.
Yeah. And that's one of the other reasons why they were losing Jim Seidel after the dinner scene. That's one of the reasons why it went so long. The other one is they ran out of prosthetics for Grandpa.
Right.
So they kind of had to get it.
But I love that they all have this reverence for him as the matriarch of the family, who's the original killer, the best killer ever, he's
a one whacker.
Yeah, right with a
hammer. I love they keep shoving a hammer in his hand, and he just keeps, he's
dropping it.
Well, and it's such a moment because, again, not having seen it, you kind of expect, they're going to bend, and then the tub. And they're got this whole thing that they do. It's clearly they know what they're all doing. They're treating people like farm animals. They're going to butcher her. You think, okay, we've seen people get killed with hammers in this film already. So and then they're going to hand him, and then he keeps missing. And there's just this visceral terror to that. The idea of, even if you're there and okay, I'm dead. There's nothing else I can do. And then the idea that he's just fumbling around with it. There's something really the fact that it's inefficient is even more disturbing than if he just bashed her and then it's over.
And the best thing is that it's a family moment.
They're bonding.
It's very ritualistic.
Yeah.
Like this is what this family does.
It's like Dad cutting the turkey on Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
exactly.
He is no longer a one whacker.
Yeah, and also if you notice on Leatherface's main mask, he has this big stitch scar right on the top there. That's where he hit that person in the head with a hammer.
Yeah. Every mask has its own particular head wound. That's the nice thing about it. Yeah,
the attention to detail in this film is amazing. People might want to watch this film and dismiss it as just like a grindhouse cheapie or whatever, but there was actually 868 edits done to this 90-minute film.
Mm-hmm.
The editing was actually professionally done.
Yeah. The thing with like exploitation films, I mean, a lot of the real cheapies is that they just kind of look like crap because they're they shot things like twice and it's just, okay, take the best take and move on. This isn't that. This is very intentionally put together, on a small budget, but like there's a real like beating heart to this, and it shows.
I would love to see the actors knew Gunner. They've talked to Gunner. Everything was fine, and then they started shooting the film, and Gunner disappeared during the prerequisite parts of the film, and they never saw Leatherface ever. So when it was their turn to get killed, Leatherface would just pop out all decked up, and they've never seen him before, and the people just freaked the fuck out when they saw him for the first time. Even though they knew it was fake, they knew it was a film. I would love to see those first outtakes of them freaking the fuck out when they first see him, because Jerry actually got so scared because there was a guy actually holding Jerry by the back of the pants that was supposed to help him fall down immediately, like he got hit with the sledgehammer. He got so scared he screamed and fought, got loose of the guy and ducked and jumped out and then basically dove out the door.
Yeah,
past Leatherface and then ran for it.
And
that was a literal fear.
Yeah,
and I'm
Jerry was the guy with glasses, by the way, for those listening. If you're not entirely sure,
basically everyone had a perm back then, and Jerry did scream like a girl.
Those scenes are effective too. If the hammer, really well done. How they pulled those off, they look like he hit him with a hammer. Like it's very well done, and they just did it in one shot or whatever. It's again, you keep trying to. People keep trying to downplay this film and try to second guess it and shit. And as Tobe Hooper at this point was 30 years old, he knew how to make fucking films.
Yeah, well, and he had a different outlook on things, too, because one of the things, the first kill in the film of Hank, I wouldn't have thought, he thought about it more. What happens when you got hit in the head with a hammer? First brain matter, shards of skull would go in your brain, which would cause tremors and seizures and, things like that. And and I wouldn't have thought about that. I would just be like, you crushed the motherfucker and he's dead. And that's why Hank started flopping and flipping around on the floor. And I'm like, that is beautiful.
I love the way Tobe Hooper talks about this shit in interviews too, because he's such a mild-mannered, laid-back, reserved guy, but he talks about this stuff so frankly. But at the same time, you can see he's kind of like skeeved out about it. By the same time, and brain shimmers would go in there, and oh god, it's terrible. It's like, he's actually disturbed by the stuff he thinks of, which is
we spent a long time figuring out ways to kill people, and it's just when you get hit in the head with a hammer, pieces of skull goes into your brain, and it's not very nice. And he says this kind of calm, like weird, and then he's like, "Oh, it's unpleasant."
I absolutely love Tobe Hooper. I mean,
I've seen interviews with people who are like mystery writers, and it's like, well, I spent like a week trying to figure out how to poison somebody. Sort of like, there's a lot of that in that kind of genre because you got to be clever, you got to kind of figure out some new way and. It does get morbid, but I mean, it's funny how, like, again, I don't know Hooper's personality all that well, but Romero was such like a kind man, and yet was so known
Hooper,
for this stuff, and
they're very similar. I mean, they were both dyed in the wool, like anti-establishment generation kind of dudes. I mean, they were both from that sort of idea, anti-Nixon, anti-Vietnam War kind of guys,
i.e. reasonable human beings. Yes, get it.
Yeah.
Actually, the one thing is I always noticed whenever I listen to Gunner, I almost get the vibe that I'm like, I don't know, they're so similar in voice and tone to George Romero, like Gunner is. It's a really weird. It's like, wow, I feel like I'm talking to George. It's weird. He has this kind of similar tone in his voice.
Well, Gunner's like that gentle giant kind of guy, right? And I guess Romero is too, because Romero was like 6'5".
He was he's a big boy.
Yeah, but I mean, and Gunnar Hansen. I mean, I was watching.
Did he have like a math degree or something? Did I read that right?
He might have. He was an educated guy. Like he was a poet and shit before he started acting. And he was a writer and all that. You watch his interviews; he's incredibly articulate. Like I was watching the documentaries on the DVD before we did the podcast, and I mean, the guy, he just kept talking about, very reasonably. Yeah, they kept offering me Leatherface in the subsequent sequels, and they weren't going to offer me anything above scale, so I said no.
They offered. Is it part 2 or part 3? No, is it part 3? They offered him scale plus 10%.
That was part 2, actually.
And then they said, why the 10%? Well, that's for your agent. But that's too low. So come back with another figure. And then they came back with scale, and they dropped the 10%. And then he goes, why did you drop the 10%? Well, we found out you don't have an agent, so you don't need the money.
Yeah,
like they just these people have been literally given no respect at all.
That was fucking canon. They did that to him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that's understandable. And then when they got to part 3, it was out of their hands. It was studio shit saying basically we're not going to give him any more than scale. Why the fuck would we?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I didn't know this too, but like part 2 and part 3 were completely obliterated by their owners, by the film companies and stuff. Mm-hmm. 2 wasn't even done, I guess, and they made it into the complete film. Like I didn't know that. I still enjoy both films, but I really now would have loved to see what the directors would have made the films.
Tobe Hooper had a final cut, and he had all the footage for it as well. But from what I understand, even he said it's like that footage is probably gone. It's just probably gone. So. I mean, Canon fucking raped that film. They kept sending him money and then taking money away, basically second-guessing all his decisions, because they basically wanted him to make the Texas Chainsaw Massacre over again.
Yeah, they just wanted the same film regurgitated again and again and again and again. Yeah.
So I'll go to a little bit of trivia pieces here. At that point, Texas Chainsaw Massacre it was one of the most successful independent films in history. But you can't get necessarily accurate earnings for this film because the guys they signed up for distribution was Bryanston Pictures, which was a short-lived mafia group.
The Cosa Nostra.
Yeah. So they basically took all their money, and not that they only take all their money, they took all the money of the actors and stuff. Like all the actors talk about how they originally had points in the film. What they didn't understand was they basically had points in the points that the makers of the film had with this distribution company, which basically added up to nothing. One guy said, my first royalty check was $47, even though the movie was making over $100 million at that point in the box office.
Later, I guess they sued. They actually, Ken that went there and then talked.
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
From the leader of that, and he said, "Well, if you don't give us their money or whatever, or the original books, we're going to sue you." And then he's like, "You don't have the balls to sue me," that kind of thing. And he's like, "He was right. I didn't sue him there. I came back to Texas and sued him."
Because they had a meeting with the dude. They had a fucking Bryanston Pictures, and he had 2 big mafia thugs on either side apparently while they were having the meeting. So, but yeah, they got to a point where I think another company bought the rights to it, just totally flat out for like $400,000 and gave a little bit more money back to everybody involved. But I mean, still then everybody wasn't made whole. I mean, you see interviews in the last few years there's still tension there with a lot of people where they're saying
$400,000 probably should have just been divided up amongst the cast themselves. That's how much money they got screwed out of.
Some of them will say nice things because, hey, it was the 40th anniversary or whatever, and I'm going to get some money out of this deal now because of DVD and appearances and all that shit.
Yes.
But for the most part, for years, everybody, like, there was a lot of sour cast members and production members in this film. I don't even want to talk to Tobe Hooper. Fuck this shit, you know. Apparently, Gunnar Hansen, when he was on the film, he could run faster than Marilyn Burns, so that's why you see him doing all that shit where he's, like, chainsawing trees and shit just to give her time to run away. So he could catch up with her. It wasn't until 2000 that the British Film Board lifted its ban on the film so it could be distributed in England. So that's how long this was infamous in there. Germany apparently was even worse.
Yes, Germany is always worse.
It was released in Germany, but I think they cut it down to under 70 minutes.
In Britain, they said they couldn't pinpoint one particular moment in the film that they could cut, that they felt needed cut. However, they felt the whole film in general was a danger to society. And that's why they put it on they couldn't find anything to cut, but they put the whole film because they're like, well, the film in its entirety and the way it's shot and the vibe it gives you is enough reason to say it's a crime against society and we need to put it on our list.
Doesn't that speak to the overall success of the movie where it's there's not single scenes you can think of cutting out. It's like the entire feeling, the entire mood of the entire movie is so oppressive and just unnerving.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck, the whole movie has to go.
I just love how there's still these sports where these can't go and this is a dangerous society and all this. I said, yeah, they did that in Germany in 1931. They did that a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and people still think it's okay to have these boards that tell people what to think and what they can't watch. And it's like, I understand, there's certain things that you can cut out of a film because of certain reasons. For instance, when I went into Germany in 2010, they just released Halloween 2.
Right.
I'm like, really? You just literally released a film that's as old as I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
And fun fact, the cut that's apparently the cut that's in Germany right now is a 75-minute version. That's the new longer version, apparently.
That's the new longer one. Wow. Okay, that's great.
Where the movie itself is 83 to 88 minutes long.
I'm assuming the first cut of the German version was all just butt shots.
Could have been.
You know what? I want that version.
Yeah.
That's the good version, really, right?
Yeah, that's the fantastically German version. Thank you.
Yeah. Budget for this was $60,000 initially, and then there was a bunch of extra money added on to it as well. IMDb says $300,000, which I don't know where the fuck they get that from. That seems incredibly high. Even with mafia influence, it seems incredibly high. Although gross was $30 million at the time, which if you adjust it for today's standards, $146 million in the box office. Just in the U.S., apparently. And rentals as well got like $14 million. So it was an incredible success, at least for whoever had the rights to it, not necessarily the people who made it. I think we should take a sec to talk about the sound design for this as well, because I think that's another important part of it before we get to our final thoughts. I really love the soundtrack for this. There's some like just sort of outlaw country stuff on the soundtrack that are actual songs.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have Wayne Bell and Tobe Hooper.
Yes.
They basically spent their time recording different sounds. So they had this entire library of sounds, and then they just started mixing them together for the atmospheric, right?
That's when I realized how much drugs he did. I heard some stories from Wayne Bell saying, what I'll do is I'll randomly get home, and then there'll be a call from Toby, and I'll get the message board. He goes, okay, we're doing ice today. We're going to focus on ice. And I'm like, wow, he is so out of it with Coke. It's great. Yeah.
He used all kinds of stuff. Like he had this weird African instrument that he was taking like a tuning fork across. Apparently...
It was a bow. It was a bow. He was strumming it with a bow as hard as he could. Yeah, and
that's and then like the tuning fork across guitar strings, I believe, is the snap, like the flashes from the camera sound.
That's the greatest sound in the whole film. I love that sound.
They were really experimenting with shit, and apparently Hooper was just so into that before he even made this film, where just experimental music. So they were just taking all these household items, real instruments, weird shit, and just making sounds, and then just taking all the sounds and combining them however the fuck they wanted to.
I like to see that. That's another thing. That's something that is completely different from the 50s and 60s too, because in the 50s and 60s you had the horror genre. Okay, we don't have money to make a good score. We're going to just timpani this and timpani that, or dun, 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 or just like use some weird spacey effects here and spacey effects there. Those guys were already playing with the abnormal. They were already playing with the surreal kind of crazy out there vibes with stuff like that. So they did it because they weren't going to use regular music. They were going to make their own stuff. They already knew that, and that brought a whole new atmosphere and a new direction to films that generally in the horror society wasn't there at the time. Even Night of the Living Dead was stock noises. You know what I mean? It wasn't. We had two amazingly epic film people, musical people working on it. No, it was just still stock film. So the 70s brought on that whole new genre, and then you get Goblin and everything goes, okay, forget everything else because you have Goblin. But at the same time, this is the shit. This is still new age cutting shit that you had going on. That wasn't your regular old. I just think if you just threw the stuff that I was a teenage Frankenstein and threw that score on top of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it would just completely ruin the film.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. It just wouldn't work with all the stock kind of crazy sci-fi sounds and horror movie generic sounds. It gives everything this vibe that you never come back from it. Once you first actually see Texas Chainsaw, the surreal vibe from it, just kind of sticks with you. At least it stuck with me anyway. I don't know, but some people can just walk away from it going, I got nothing out of it, but I certainly did.
Watching it more and more and seeing other films after it actually just heightens my love of this film. Where you see the influences of this film, how it's gone on, and how it's informed other films. It just the more films you see, the more you see Texas Chainsaw Massacre in it, and just makes you appreciate it more. And that's why I love this film so much.
I live in the country. I have swung a chainsaw around like an idiot. Because of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And as soon as you fire up a chainsaw and no one's looking, I have to do the spin. I have to do a little, how you doing? There we go. It's something you do.
Well, did you have a metal plate on your leg with hamburger on top of it for the
lick my plate, dog dick? That's all I can say. Yeah, but I did chainsaw my pants right where he did, but that was more of an accident.
Because that's the only real chainsaw effect you see is where he actually chainsaws himself in the leg. Like he chainsaws Franklin, but it's
that's the best part. That's the only real gore you see in the film. This film still actually uses your brain instead.
Yeah, you know how they did the Franklin thing too?
They were spitting at him.
Yeah, they were spitting blood. There was two people on either side of Franklin spitting blood on Gunnar Hansen.
Even Franklin, he said even he had stuff in his mouth. He was like, "Yeah, we just spit and spit until we couldn't spit anymore." I'm like, that's great.
Well, I think we should move on to final thoughts here. So, Daniel, I'll go to you first, sir.
It's a great film. I'm definitely going to be revisiting it, kind of getting more of the technical side of it. I really admire it, and I'm glad I finally got to see Tobe Hooper. So I'm going to watch some more, definitely. So hopefully next month we'll get a chance to kind of visit some of these films and talk about them some more. I like it.
Sweet.
Sorry, I'm a little tired. I'm not. I've been a little low energy tonight, but it's fine.
Fun.
It's fun. It's fun listening to you guys talk about it more so than me talk about it. So.
Yeah, Paul.
Wow, this is, like I said, it's a film that's kind of ridden with me ever since I was a kid. I'm a weird SOB anyway, so I kind of love to personify myself as a fucking weird son of a bitch. And I still have on my front porch things I made out of bones that are just like wind chimes and stuff like that, just because I watched Texas Chainsaw. I mean, it doesn't leave you once you're a freakhead like I am, and you just kind of love it. You know, it's just great. It's definitely a film that everyone has to see. I hate the idea. I mean, I loathe, and I would literally love to actually chainsaw people to death when I hear them say, "Oh, I saw the remake, but I've never seen the original." I mean, like, I just, well, I never killed you before, but I could give it a go. That kind of thing. I just don't like people, and it just pisses me off because the remake is so not good compared to the original anyway. I'm not going to say it's not good. I'm just going to say it's not good compared to the original.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
There you go. Yeah. I don't know. It's speaking to a whole nother crowd and a whole nother mentality and a whole nother mindset. These remakes don't speak to people who watched films back then. They don't.
Right.
Because people they can't handle, they say 12 minutes, right? 12 minutes in and I didn't see breasts or a death. I cannot handle this. Like, you know what I mean? I was like that when I was 9. You know what I mean? So basically,
to be fair, in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you never see breasts and you don't see death for at least half an hour. So
yeah. Well, actually, the one thing about the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, apparently, there's outtakes of tits. When they went to go swimming, she was naked at some point in time, and I'm like, where is that at? Where is this at?
It's weird. That doesn't even make sense because they went down there for the swimming hole and it was all dried up.
Yeah, there's actually some footage of her walking through the farmhouse that they were going to. So Sally's grandparents' farmhouse, and her tits are out.
Yeah,
and I'm like, what happened? I know they're small, but I want them. Come on now, what's going on?
This film now gets -5 stars.
Yeah, you removed breasts from your plan. You are now the worst film ever made. I'm going to go watch the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street now because it's so much better of a film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, I love this film. I think Tobe Hooper is a criminally underrated filmmaker who unfortunately just was always in the wrong place at the wrong time as far as getting breaks to make film. As I was doing more research for this film, even I was starting to see there was even sort of doubt in the sort of widely sort of publicized idea that he was not the director of Poltergeist. And that's kind of a thing I've even spread on podcasts before, saying, yeah, it was Steven Spielberg all along. But there's some credible evidence out there as well that he was unfairly maligned for that, and that was another kind of thing that sabotaged his career. And I just feel really bad that he didn't quite get the due that he was deserved. I think he is a filmmaker in the league of a Wes Craven or even a George Romero to a certain degree. I feel kind of bad for him that he didn't get his due sort of respect that I think he deserved. And he made some really goddamn great films in his peak period. I mean, from Texas Chainsaw Massacre onward to the early 80s, he made Eaten Alive. He made Poltergeist. He made Life Force. He made fucking Invaders from Mars. And I think those are all really good fucking movies.
Yes. I actually just watched Life Force because of your recommendation.
Awesome. And I think Daniel's going to like Life Force as well, quite a bit.
All I can say is titties.
Titties. Non-stop goddamn titties in that film.
Yeah. But no, to be completely fair, the special effects of that film blow even like Return of the Living Dead out of the water.
They do. They're really good. They're really good.
Yes. And I used Return of the Living Dead as a reference because you got to watch the movie.
Yeah. But, Tobe Hooper, I think, was incredibly underrated. Even when he was saddled with, like, really shitty projects later in his career, you could still kind of see the talent there, even if the movie wasn't necessarily good. I just feel really bad that his last couple of years apparently weren't all that good, and he just kind of died, and it's really sad. But, I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's like Night of the Living Dead. I would compare it to that as far as kind of one of those films that really changed horror. Like, it really changed horror. Like, everyone says Night of the Living Dead was the turning point, and I would tend to agree. But if anything, fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre was really that final little stretch that kicked people over the fucking
Night
side.
of the Living Dead opened the doors for everybody.
Yeah.
But it's not about opening the doors. It's what happens when the doors are open. That's really the big point. You know what I mean? And this is Texas Chainsaw Massacre happened because of that. So everything that happens after Night of the Living Dead still changes and still turns the whole horror movie genre. You know what I mean? Like it's a constant thing. It's not just one pivotal film and the rest is history. Yes, Night of the Living Dead has changed zombie movies forever, but that opened the door for other people to come in and change other genres forever. You know what I mean? And without Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we may never have Pieces. And like things like you can walk it through and just see what we may never have had. So I mean, there's a lot of things.
I mean, even fucking Evil Dead, probably not. I mean,
no, you wouldn't have had Evil Dead.
I mean, the chainsaw imagery alone is I mean, there's no doubt that is taken right back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The idea of a chainsaw is some sort of iconic thing in horror movies is where that's come from.
And then you can even use the Night of the Living Dead being Night of the Living Dead plus Texas Chainsaw is catalyst for that. You know what I mean? Like and if you didn't have those two, you wouldn't have anything. I mean, they're so prevalent in today's horror movies. Just to say they're not good films is almost a ludicrous thing to say. Even I know people have different perspectives on films, but just the and actually Jim Van Beaver said something pretty good. He's like, well, watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre is basically watching like Citizen Kane, depending on what you're trying to talk about. You know,
I saw us talk about that where he says like Citizen Kane, and he also included Dawn of the Dead in that discussion. So he's like,
oh yeah, Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, he did say that, didn't he?
Yeah, so he was like, that's one of those seminal films that kind of changed film history. Yeah, I agree. DVD info, there was a Geonon / Pioneer release in 2003, which was a special edition, which is pretty goddamn good. I had that release. It was good. But then Dark Sky came out and fucking just destroyed all previous releases with their 2-disc Ultimate Edition for 2007, and they had a Blu-ray in 2008. And
it's
then
the 2007, the metal box.
It's the metal box.
You must have the metal box.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's fucking good stuff. And then there was a 2014 40th anniversary release from Dark Sky as well in both formats. Yeah, I've seen the Blu-ray versions of it as well. Pictures of it even looks better, which surprised the fuck out of me because the DVD release from 2007 looked immaculate. So good. I didn't think they could get any clearer, but the Blu-ray retains the grain, yet somehow makes the film still look better, which is amazing. I'm thrilled how fucking good this film looks. That in part is also just because Tobe Hooper and the team he had behind him, they knew how to fucking make movies. They just had inferior fucking film grain to work with at the time, but they got it cleaned up and goddamn, it looks great. So those are your best options.
Then I was kind of going in and out of different, social groups at the time. And I was drinking Thor's Hammer vodka quite regularly back in the day. And I used to go, get the hammer! Like I used to yell, get the hammer, and bring the bitch on down. You know, and I used to do like the little, like he has to do like these little crotch thrusts when he says it and stuff.
Yeah.
And I used to go to different bars that I knew and these were like a whole different sect of people. They weren't all just horror movie fans or just metalheads or this or this. And I just now and again around like, get the hammer, like bring the bitch on down. I'm like, I'm infecting people. I'm infecting people with Texas chainsaws. It's amazing. Like I can hear this shit, and it's such a great film, and it's a fun film.
It is.
And I've actually we had a good time because I lived on even though I lived close to a town, I lived on a road that just had a lot of dirt, and we had one night we were hanging out and my buddy had a broom for some reason. He came out and he smacked me in the face with it. And I got down in front of the car and he started, you dog dick, you little coon shit. He's like, I told you to stay away from that graveyard. And I'm like, they didn't say nothing. And the dust was coming up in front of the headlights of the car that was on there. And I'm like, this
reminds me, that's something I forgot to mention there when I was talking about Marilyn Burns basically getting beat to shit in this film.
Yes.
that was another moment where she got beat to shit. Jim Sedow was trying to be really light on her, and they had to do so many takes because Tobe Hooper's going, "You're not beating her hard enough, Jim.
Yeah,
you got to start hitting."
I felt bad for Jim because he's like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't.
Yeah, I didn't want to do it.
I didn't want to do it, And then he said on the 8th take, Marilyn just is like, just hit me, Jim. Just hit me as hard as you can. Let's get this over with. I'm tired. Like, just beat the crap out of me. And he's like, and the funny thing is, it'll change because the real story is kind of like, at the 8th take, she just begged him to beat the shit out of him because she wanted to get this over with. And he was like, "Oh, okay, I'll try," and he did it. But some of it, he's like, "Well, the more I did it, the more I got into it, the more I'm like, you fucking liar."
Yeah, no, that's not Jim Sedow at all.
Yeah, no, he did not like doing that. And then and he did the same thing to Ed Neal. Was it Ed Neal, the hitchhiker? Yeah, he did the same thing to him in front of that, and he was, the hitchhiker was bitching because he's like, you can't see a single skull shot in that whole fucking thing, but he beat the shit out of me in that dirt. He's like, couldn't hit Marilyn where the fuck, but he beat the shit out of me without a problem.
Yeah. So any final thoughts from both of you before we kick out of here?
I'm good.
Don't trespass in the country.
Yeah, don't go to Texas, basically.
No, don't worry. I mean, I'll chainsaw you, shoot you, and eat you too. So just do not trespass in the country.
Yeah, there you go.
Especially when you go to a broken out down gas station and someone says, "Do not trespass around here," and they do it anyway.
If a gas station offers you barbecue, in-house barbecue, there's probably a red flare. There's flags flying there at some point. It's like
I would gladly eat that. Without a thought, be like, no, I want that. I hope it's.
Well, they all enjoyed it, but where
it's good long pig, baby. You don't want to take those girls over to the old house. Those things are dangerous.
Yeah.
Especially with asses like that. Why don't you just have sex? It's much funner. It's much more fun.
So next week we're not going to have an official episode. It's just going to be the blood on the tracks. October, big things. We're going to try to do the same thing we did last October. We're going to have some bonus episodes and regular episodes and have all kinds of fucking horror goodness for you guys. Going to try to lock down some guests and shit and talk about stuff. It'll be a lot of fun. Until then, Daniel Harper, please tell people where they can find you on the interwebs.
Best way to find me, just go to my Twitter at Daniel E. Harper.
Awesome. Paul, where can people find you, sir?
PA Brew News, YouTube, Facebook, Oil Paintings by Peter O'Malley, Facebook, the whole deal, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. I haven't done it in a long time. But October, starting a new job, should have, hopefully, lots of days off.
Cool. Awesome.
So should be involved more than I have been. There you go.
Awesome, because that works out well because we have some bonus content we need to dig into for October, so it should be fun.
Yay.
Yeah, and as for this podcast, go to tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can find our iTunes/Apple Podcast link. You can find our YouTube. You can find our Facebook. Facebook, They Must Be Destroyed on Site is our group. Join that as the best place to get in touch with us, to leave questions, comments, film suggestions, criticisms, recipes for fucking meatloaf and shit, as long as it doesn't have any of those peppercorns in it, right, Paul?
The hard-shell peppercorns.
Those hard-shell peppercorns. We probably should have save that joke for Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, but fuck it. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people listening who are in the know for that one. So there you go. Yeah. But until next time, guys, I'm not quite sure what's going to be the next official episode, but it will be coming in October. Thank you all for listening, and thank you, Daniel and Paul, for joining me tonight.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for having us.
Yeah. All right. Goodbye.
Hey.
day in the sidewalk cafe, drinking coffee, watching women walking by. The color of their hair, not the reason that I stare, but I always was a fool for blind. Ba boo die, boo die. Jiggle and they sway as they strut along the way, watching most enough to make it high. The shimmering light is not what brings the buck, but I'll always be a fool for a blind. Every day in a sidewalk cafe, drinking coffee, watching women walk by. The color of their hair, not the reason that I stare, but I'll always be a fool for a blind.
Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For past episodes and links to our iTunes, YouTube, and Facebook group, please visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can also find links to other podcasts and websites of similar interest. If you subscribe to us on iTunes, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and a review. Please join our Facebook group, as it's the single best place to get in contact with the hosts and to know what's coming up on the podcast. Thank you. Drive through.